The voicemail didn't even start with my name. It was my mother's voice, sharp, rehearsed, like she was reading lines off a script. "We've made a decision. You're no longer part of the company." That was all. No thank you. No explanation. Not even the courtesy of saying Vivian. After 17 years of my life poured into our family business, 17 tax seasons, countless late nights, weekends traded for deadlines, I was erased with a single message. I sat there staring at my coffee as it turned cold, realizing the people I thought I was building a legacy with had quietly decided I was disposable. This wasn't just the end of a job, it was betrayal, delivered in less than 30 seconds. Stay with me, and if you love powerful revenge stories, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share yours with us. I was 21 the first time I stepped into our family's factory. My shoes were too clean, my suit too stiff, and I remember one of the line managers joking that I looked like I'd gotten lost on my way to a job interview at the bank. He wasn't wrong. I had no real experience, just a degree and an eagerness to prove myself. But I learned quickly. I picked up everything I could: procurement, payroll, supply chain, logistics, anything that would keep me useful. What I lacked in polish, I made up for with stubborn hours. I was the first to arrive and the last to leave, taking night classes to make sense of the numbers I was responsible for by day. For nearly 2 decades, my life revolved around that business. While friends my age spent summers backpacking across Europe or posting beach photos on Instagram, I was buried in spreadsheets and loan applications. I skipped holidays, skipped vacations, skipped sleep. I told myself it was worth it because family meant sacrifice. And whenever a crisis hit, and they always did, I was the one holding the line. When 2 major clients defaulted, the company was days away from missing payroll. I didn't tell anyone, not even my parents. I pulled a second mortgage on my house and funneled the cash through a shell account, labeling it stabilization liquidity so it wouldn't look desperate. Employees got their paychecks on time, but no one knew it was me who kept the lights on. That became the pattern. I was the invisible safety net, the uncredited fix, the quiet reason the family name stayed intact. And the strangest part? I didn't mind. I believed that's what loyalty was, doing the work, even if no one saw it, keeping things steady while others got the credit. My mother would smile at parties and tell people, "Viv keeps us grounded." She said it like I was still a kid, balancing her checkbook at the kitchen table. I wore those words like armor, convincing myself they meant appreciation. Meanwhile, my older brother Zach was living a completely different story. He floated from one startup to the next, failing upward each time. Until eventually, my parents carved out a role for him at the company, some vague title with vision in it. He never once sat in on a late-night payroll scramble, never once had to juggle unpaid invoices or negotiate with a vendor on the edge of walking away. But when something went right, when the company pulled through a tough quarter, somehow Zach's name was the one I heard praised. I'd overhear my father telling board members, "That was a smart move on Zach's part." Meanwhile, Zach hadn't even logged into QuickBooks in months. Still, I swallowed it. I told myself it didn't matter who got the applause as long as the business survived. I believed family was about carrying each other, and if that meant I carried more, so be it. After all, this was our legacy. My grandfather had started it with one welding machine and a handshake back in the 60s. I thought protecting it was my duty, my way of proving I belonged. What I didn't realize then was that loyalty, in my family, was a one-way street. At first, the changes were subtle, almost easy to dismiss as mistakes. A meeting invite that never landed in my inbox, a shared drive I suddenly couldn't access, a spreadsheet I had built from scratch 6 years earlier that now flashed permission denied across the screen. I told myself it was just glitches, things that happen in every company. But one by one, The doors I used to walk through started quietly closing. I asked about it, of course. Elaine, my mother, would smile in that calm, dismissive way of hers and say, "Don't overthink it, Viv. You're already carrying too much. Focus on what you're good at." She said it like she was doing me a favor, as if trimming my role was for my own well-being. At first, I even believed her. After all, wasn't family supposed to look out for you? But the pattern grew harder to ignore. My name disappeared from the updated org chart. When I brought it up, they brushed it off. It's just a visual. Doesn't mean anything. A year later, my headshot was gone from the company website. The About Us page listed Graham as founder, Elaine as president, and Zach as executive vision lead. No CFO, no mention of finance, no trace of me at all. That was the first time it really hit me. I had become invisible in my own family's business. Not fired, not formally demoted, just erased. One line at a time. Meanwhile, Zach thrived in the spotlight. Every move that kept the company afloat, moves I had orchestrated behind the scenes somehow, ended up credited to him. When I quietly funneled cash to cover payroll, my father told a board member how proud he was of Zach's invoice strategy. When I renegotiated supplier contracts to prevent a shutdown, Elaine praised Zach's forward thinking. My fingerprints were all over those decisions, but the credit was rewritten, the story retold, until even outsiders believed it had been him all along. That kind of theft doesn't make headlines. It doesn't leave a paper trail, but it eats at you. It makes you question your own sanity. I'd sit in my kitchen late at night with old reports spread across the table, reminding myself, yes, I did this. Yes, it was me who pulled the company back from collapse. The numbers didn't lie, even if my family did. The betrayal cut deeper because there was never a fight, never a single confrontation where I could defend myself. They didn't argue me out. They just made me optional, then unnecessary, and finally non-existent. It's one thing to be fired from a job. It's another to be slowly ghosted from your own legacy. The breaking point came with a document I was never meant to see. A restructuring notice sent to legal, stamped, and signed. At the bottom, under "Initiated by," was my mother's name. Elaine Rhodes, the same woman who once held my head in her lap when I cried over missing payroll, telling me, "We couldn't do this without you." The same mother who had smiled at holiday dinners and said, "Viv keeps us grounded." Seeing her signature under a line that effectively erased me from the company was a different kind of heartbreak. It wasn't just professional, it was personal, intimate, like the ground shifting under my feet. Because betrayal from strangers is survivable. Betrayal from family? That leaves a scar you can't explain to anyone who hasn't lived it. I kept waiting for a follow-up call, some acknowledgement, maybe even an apology. But silence was all I got. Weeks passed, and I noticed more and more of my responsibilities slipping away. Vendor updates that used to come to me now went to Zach. Financial reports that I had personally designed were rewritten in his language. Every piece of proof that I had mattered was being scrubbed clean. What haunted me most wasn't the work itself. It was how easy it was for them. No shouting match, no slammed doors, no family blow-up around the conference table. Just quiet subtraction. A kind of corporate surgery performed so delicately I almost didn't notice until it was too late. I started taking screenshots, not because I needed evidence, but because I couldn't quite believe it myself. My absence was so complete, so deliberate, that I needed reminders that I had ever been there. Photos of the org chart with my name missing. The About Us page without my face. Email chains where I had once been looped in, now ending without me. Proof, at least for me, that I wasn't imagining it. And yet, every time I considered confronting them, I froze. What was I supposed to say? "You forgot me." They hadn't. They had erased me on purpose. There's a difference. By the time the voicemail came, it almost felt inevitable. The slow erasure had become so routine that hearing my mother's clipped, practiced voice saying, "You're no longer part of the company," was just the final nail. But still, it was her voice. And after everything I had done, all the years I had carried them, that was how they chose to end it. Not with a conversation, not even with my name, just a message that fit neatly into 30 seconds. And in that 30 seconds, the truth was louder than any argument could have been. I wasn't family anymore. At least, not the kind that mattered to them. The night after the voicemail, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even call back. Instead, I opened my laptop, scrolled through old folders, and found an email thread I hadn't touched in nearly 2 years. It was from a corporate lawyer I'd met at a finance conference in Phoenix. At the time, we had only exchanged business cards, a polite formality. But I had kept her contact, almost without thinking, like tucking away a spare key you hope you'll never need. That night, I realized I finally did. I typed a message with no backstory, no emotion, just the facts. "It's time. Let's talk options regarding my 40% stake in Rhodes Manufacturing." I hit send and closed the laptop. It was the quietest decision I had ever made, but it shifted something in me. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to prove my worth to my family. I was protecting it. The following days, I began gathering everything, every overlooked detail, every forgotten receipt, every sacrifice I had made to keep that company alive. My office filled with stacks of binders, paper trails no one in my family thought I had kept, old bank transfers where I'd pulled from my personal accounts to cover payroll, vendor contracts I had renegotiated to stop the bleeding, spreadsheets from long nights where I crunched numbers to make impossible budgets work. I color-coded each year, labeled every folder, cross-referenced every file. It wasn't anger that drove me. It was accuracy. I was finally balancing the books, not for Rhodes Manufacturing, but for myself. The lawyer, Janet, responded quickly. She didn't ask for explanations. She simply wrote, "Understood. Quiet diligence first. No alerts." That phrase stuck with me. Quiet diligence. It felt like a language I finally understood. While my family thought they had neatly erased me, I was building a record of everything they had tried to bury. Janet introduced me to a potential buyer, a private equity firm led by a man named Daniel Meyer. He didn't come with flashy presentations or hollow promises. He sat across from me in a quiet Bellevue restaurant, wearing a simple gray sweater, speaking in measured tones. "We specialize in acquiring minority stakes in family businesses experiencing transition turbulence," he said. That was his term, transition turbulence. I called it abandonment. He didn't ask me to badmouth my family. He didn't need to. My binders spoke louder than any words I could have offered. He flipped through color-coded tabs showing off the book payroll rescues, duplicated payments to shady marketing agencies, and the second mortgage I had hidden behind vague quarterly reports. He nodded quietly, never surprised, just taking it all in. "You were the stopgap," he finally said. "They leaned on you until they thought they didn't need you anymore." For the first time, someone outside the family acknowledged what I had always known, but never dared to say aloud. I wasn't disposable. I had been essential. Over the next week, Daniel's team launched their own due diligence. They requested board minutes, lease agreements, partnership contracts, most of which I still had copies of or had access to through my standing stake. What they uncovered was a mess. Unreported losses tied to Zach's failed Texas expansion, marketing contracts paid to shell companies, and restructuring memos that conveniently erased my name but not my financial liability. I didn't flinch. I didn't cover for them. I simply handed over the truth. Within 2 weeks, The purchase agreement was finalized. My 40% stake, independently valued by a third-party assessor, would be transferred in full to Daniel's firm. The operating agreement last updated in 2016 had no clause requiring me to offer shares back to the family first. Legally, I was free to walk away. When I signed the papers in a small, downtown office, the silence felt different this time. Not heavy, not suffocating, liberating. For 17 years, I had been the invisible safety net, the name erased from the website, the shadow behind every rescue. Now, in a single stroke of a pen, I was no longer their ghost. I was a shareholder who had exited on her own terms. The irony wasn't lost on me. They had spent years subtracting me, one role at a time, until I seemed to vanish. But by erasing me so completely, they had also freed me. I wasn't bound to the company anymore. I wasn't bound to their silence, their rewriting of history, or their favoritism. I was bound only to the truth I had documented and the deal I had secured. That was the turning point, not revenge, not justice in the dramatic sense, but a clean, deliberate exit that left them to face the storm they had created. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't bracing for another emergency call or another financial fire to put out. I had chosen my own ending, and I had chosen it quietly. When the deal finally closed, it was quieter than I expected. No dramatic courtroom, no boardroom showdown, just a polished maple table in a neutral office downtown, a few signatures, and the quiet click of a pen sliding back into its case. In that moment, 17 years of my life were reduced to paperwork, and I felt relief. My 40% stake was no longer tied to my family's name. I had walked away legally, cleanly, without giving them the satisfaction of a fight. The money cleared within days, transferred neatly into my account. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, I wasn't tethered to Rhodes Manufacturing. I didn't have to scan my phone every morning waiting for a crisis. I didn't have to wonder if Zach had taken credit for my work, or if Elaine had erased another line of my name. I was out. But freedom for me was chaos for them. It started with the calls first, a handful, then dozens. My phone lit up from dawn until midnight. Elaine, Graham, Zach. At first I ignored them. Then curiosity got the better of me, and I listened to one of Zach's voicemails. His voice was frantic, breathless, nothing like the smug executive title he wore. Viv, you have to undo this. Please, you don't understand. They froze everything. The investor, they're demanding a forensic audit. A forensic audit. Of course they were. Daniel's firm didn't just buy shares blindly. They combed through records, line by line, year by year. And the gaps were glaring. The failed Texas expansion Zach had championed? $800,000 gone, hidden behind vague line items. The duplicate payments to a marketing agency that didn't exist? Flagged instantly. The restructuring memos that had erased my name but not my liability? Sitting under a microscope, I listened to Zach plead like a child caught cheating on a test. Viv, they're going back years. They're finding things that look bad. You need to talk to them. They'll believe you. Just tell them we're clean. His desperation was almost surreal. For years, they had treated me like a disposable part, the invisible gear that kept things moving. Now, suddenly, I was the one person they thought could save them. When I finally answered one of his calls, I kept my voice calm. That sounds like standard due diligence, Zach. Silence hung heavy on the line before he stammered. You don't get it. This could ruin us. I leaned back in my chair, watching the steam curl off my coffee. Or maybe it reveals what was already true, he begged. He tried bargaining, even guilt. Mom didn't think you'd actually leave. She thought you'd fight for it. I let the words hang there, because in them was the truth. They had expected me to play a role in their script. The angry daughter demanding fairness, the one they could cast as unreasonable, then graciously forgive later. But I hadn't played that part. I had walked out the side door, sold my shares, and left them holding their mess. You said I was out, I reminded him. Now you deal with it. And then I ended the call. The panic didn't stop there. More voicemails poured in. Elaine tried a different angle emails that sounded professional, but carried a thread of desperation beneath the polished words. Can we meet privately? No lawyers. Graham never reached out at all. Maybe pride kept him silent, or maybe shame. Either way, his absence spoke louder than any excuse. Meanwhile, the audit rolled forward, unstoppable. Friends in the local business network whispered that Rhodes Manufacturing was under review. Numbers that once looked strong now appeared riddled with holes. Deals Zach had bragged about collapsed under scrutiny. The story my family had worked so hard to control unraveled faster than they could patch it. I didn't celebrate. I didn't pop champagne or dance on their downfall. Instead, I felt stillness, like I'd finally stepped out of a storm I hadn't realized I'd been living in for 17 years. For once, I woke up without my jaw clenched. I sipped coffee that stayed hot. I looked out the window and felt the sun without guilt that I should be at my desk fixing someone else's mistakes. They had cut me out because they thought it would make me disappear. But being erased didn't destroy me, it freed me. And when the audit exposed the cracks they had tried to hide, I wasn't the one left scrambling. They were. In the end, my revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't vengeful speeches or dramatic confrontations. It was simply leaving them to collapse under the weight of their own lies. My last words to Zach echoed in my head like a closing chapter. You said I was out. Now you deal with it. In the end, my story didn't close with fireworks or dramatic revenge. It ended with quiet peace, the kind I hadn't felt in nearly 2 decades. I realized something simple but powerful. Being erased from their frame didn't make me disappear. It freed me. I stopped waking up to chaos that wasn't mine. Stopped carrying a legacy that only weighed me down. Sometimes the strongest answer isn't a fight, but walking away with your worth intact. And that's exactly what I did. What about you? If your family tried to erase you like this, would you fight to be seen? Or would you walk away stronger? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share for more Pain Files stories of betrayal and justice.